The Tate brothers are now sitting in federal custody in Miami, facing extradition to Britain on dozens of charges involving rape, sex trafficking, assault, indecent images of children, and all kinds of things I'm not supposed to say in the first 60 seconds of a YouTube video, but I had to say it because that's the story. Anyway, this raises a much bigger question. Why did powerful people in Trump's political orbit, including his young son Barron, spend years treating men like these who are facing accusations like these as allies? Why did they treat them as allies? And why do they portray attempts to hold them accountable as political persecution? Because what is happening in Miami right now exposes one of MAGA's greatest moral frauds, which is MAGA morality equals punishment for their enemies, but protection for their friends. I'm Jonathan Burton, and MAGA has spent the better part of the last 10 years telling us that Democrats were the party of child rapists, molesters, and traffickers. And they even claimed that they were that MAGA was the pure party that was holy and close to God, and that they would never do such things. But when I, as a former Republican, look out with an objective eye and see what Democrats have done in the last year and compare it to what Republicans have done in the last year, it's clear that one party has been full of hypocrites and the other has actually been taking their word seriously and practicing what they preach at great cost to themselves. Because when you look at what Democrats have actually done over the past year, they've actually done what Republicans say a moral political party should do. They've pushed their own candidates aside when serious allegations arose, even when doing so could cost them important elections. And Republicans, on the other hand, are doing the exact opposite. They're doing exactly what they accuse Democrats of doing, of surprise, surprise there, right? But when the accused person, in this case, the Tate brothers, when the accused person is politically useful to them, as the Tates were, in helping get the young manosphere vote in, the allegations are magically dismissed and the evidence is explained away, and attempts to impose consequences are called political persecution. So, this isn't really about which party has people facing terrible allegations, because both parties do. The moral test is what each party does when the accused person is one of its own, and what each party does when it could become very costly to them to do the right thing. So earlier this year, Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell was one of the leading candidates for governor of California. Then four women accused him of sexual misconduct. A former employee alleged that Swalwell sexually assaulted her twice when she was too intoxicated to consent. Then three other women accused him of inappropriate touching, inappropriate massages, or sending unsolicited nude photographs. Swalwell denied the allegations, as they always seem to do, and he has not been convicted of anything. But prominent Democrats, they didn't spend 6 months attacking the women. They didn't immediately declare the allegations a deep state conspiracy. They didn't say Swalwell was being persecuted because he was such an effective Democratic warrior. They withdrew their support. They withdrew it. Senator Adam Schiff pulled his endorsement. Major labor unions backed away. Nancy Pelosi said the allegations needed to be investigated outside the context of a campaign for governor. And 2 days later, Swalwell suspended his campaign. And understand this, that was not an easy political decision for Democrats to make, because California doesn't hold an ordinary primary in which Democrats choose their nominee and Republicans choose their nominee. No, they put everybody on the same ballot. Republicans and Democrats alike, they're all thrown onto the same ballot. Who came up with this system? I have no idea, but it's like the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. But only the top two vote getters advance, regardless of party. So if two Republicans get the most votes, then in November you'll have a Republican running against the other Republican for governor of California. I mean, it sounds like a cockamamie system to me. But if several Democrats, and here's what was going on in California, if several Democrats divide the vote, like you have 4 or 5 Democrats running, and they divide the vote while you just have 2 Republicans running, and then the Republicans can get behind one of those and consolidate their vote, it's possible for both Republicans to advance in November. So you could theoretically have 2 Republicans running against each other for governor. And that's what was going on. They had a lot of Democrats running. So they were scared that the vote would get watered down for any one Democratic candidate and that the 2 Republicans might win. Well, Swalwell had been one of the strongest Democratic candidates. And because he withdrew after the deadline, his name remained on the ballot. And Democrats no longer had a star who would easily get the most votes. But because Swalwell was so well known, and name recognition is a big part of winning an election. So it looked like he would be a shoe-in and easily get a plurality of votes and be one of the top 2 vote getters in that primary. But now the Democratic vote was going to be divided among many candidates, none of whom were emerging as the preferred candidate. So it was a big risk for them to kick Swalwell out of the race. They literally could end up with 2 Republican candidates for governor. But they ultimately avoided that disaster, thankfully. But they didn't know at the time what would happen when they pushed Swalwell out. They didn't know that it would come out that way. They were willing to accept a huge political risk to do the right thing, to practice what they preach. And now I hear MAGA Republicans, especially the ones, who call themselves Christians, all over the place going, no, the Democrats are the corrupt party. They're the predator party. I mean, just look at these facts. You got to think about what you're seeing. Don't just watch things happen and not think about it. Think about what's going on. And it's not just once that this has happened with the Democrats. It happened again in Maine this year with Graham Platner. He had won the Democratic nomination to challenge Republican Senator Susan Collins in one of the most important Senate races in the country, and one that it looked like he might actually win. It could be a big pickup for the Democrats. Then a woman came out and accused Platner of entering her home without permission and forcing himself upon her. And Platner has denied the allegation, and there's been no trial and no conviction. But Democratic leaders in Maine and nationally called for him to withdraw. Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand announced that the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee would not invest in Maine if Platner remained the nominee. So he withdrew, to his credit. But that was a courageous call. And it was one that left Democrats scrambling to find a new candidate with less than 4 months until Election Day to run against the entrenched and longtime Republican senator with millions of dollars already in the bank. And today we still don't know if he'll win or lose. But they were willing to risk that seat that looked like it could have been a nice pickup for them. They were willing to risk it to do the right thing. They accepted the possibility that they could lose, and they accepted the possibility that enforcing a moral standard against one of their own could cost them political power and cost them dearly. It could cost them the majority in the Senate. Imagine if they just needed one more Democratic win and they could have taken the majority of the Senate and then they'd lose in Maine. And that was the key. Anyway, they did it. They did the right thing. They made the right call. They put principle above power. And that's what I would like to see the GOP do, the old GOP. Well, I don't know. They probably never did it. But anyway, they came closer to it than they do now. But the Democrats actually practiced what they preach. So stop with all this, both parties are exactly the same, that they all do it. They all do it. They all do it. No, the Democrats didn't do it this time. And I'm not saying they didn't do it in the past, but they're not doing it now. So we got to go with what we have now, right? All right, so let's look at how Republicans are doing on the hypocrisy scale. Let me give you a few examples. Matt Gaetz spent years facing allegations involving illegal drugs, paid sex, and a 17-year-old girl. The House Ethics Committee eventually concluded that substantial evidence showed Gaetz had paid women for sex and violated Florida's statutory rape law. And how did Donald Trump respond to all this? Did he demand that Gaetz resign from office? No, he didn't. He responded by nominating Gaetz to become Attorney General of the United States, the highest ranking law enforcement officer in the country. I mean, talk about unbelievable. So, guys, MAGA, wake up. Look at your own party before criticizing the Democrats. The leader of the Republican Party looked at a man who the House Ethics Committee had concluded had committed statutory rape under Florida law, and the president said, I want him to be the highest ranking law enforcement official in the land. You got to think about that. And look, it's not just him, it's you. You who voted for him. You, if you voted for him, you said, yeah, I'm good with that. I want a rapist to be the attorney general. You said that when you voted for him. And don't claim, well, I didn't know. If you didn't know, you weren't paying attention and you shouldn't have voted. You shouldn't vote if you don't have that much information. You know, isn't that what you guys always say? People should have a certain level of civic awareness before they vote. Well, let's apply that to you. And if you're not aware of these things, then why are you voting? You know? And all of this coming, of course, from the man who a civil jury found liable for sexually abusing E. Jean Carroll and defaming her. A unanimous jury finding agreed with that judgment after hearing all the evidence. But knowing all that, Republican voters nominated him again. So now let's take the spotlight off Trump and the corrupt Republican politicians and put it squarely where it belongs, on the corrupt Republican voters. Let's stop blaming their leaders. It's time to blame the voters a little bit. Hold them responsible too, don't you think? Especially the Christian Republicans. I mean, they knew all this when they voted for him again. And like I say, if they didn't, they shouldn't have been voting. They had no business voting if they didn't have that much knowledge about current events. But it didn't stop them. It didn't even slow them down from voting for this man. And now they get up and preach against Democrats. I mean, I mean, it's pretty unbelievable, but there's more. That's not it. That's not all of it. Now we have Republican Congressman Max Miller of Ohio. Miller's former wife has accused him of domestic abuse, threats, and throwing hot water on her. Miller denies abusing her, although a recording he provided reportedly acknowledges that a water incident occurred while disputing the circumstances surrounding it. And look at what this genius decided to do right before the election. He decided to sue his wife for coming out and telling what happened to her. In other words, he's suing her because she came out and said what he did to her, because he said that her speaking out on that has threatened his chances for re-election. But that lawsuit, which he filed just a few months, about a little over 2 months ago, in an election year, that lawsuit is now keeping this whole story alive and front and center for Republicans in Ohio.
Ohio Congressman Max Miller is suing his ex-wife for defamation. The two-term Republican filed the lawsuit yesterday in Cleveland against Emily Marino, the daughter of Ohio Senator Bernie Marino. Miller called her accusations that he was violent and abusive as a husband and father false, and says they're threatening his re-election bid this fall. A spokesperson for Emily Marino says, quote, Miller will not silence her, end quote.
A real genius there. Wow. And I'm sure Republicans in Cleveland will say, it's just allegations. Nothing has been proven. Well, it was just allegations for Graham Platner and Eric Swalwell, too. Nothing's been proven in either of those cases. So what we're seeing here is that Democrats are taking a harder line against this kind of thing, this kind of abuse, than Republicans are, which means Republicans have no grounds to speak on the issue. But wait, there's more. There's Republican Congressman Cory Mills of Florida, another genius. He's faced allegations involving domestic violence and threatening to release intimate photographs and videos of a former girlfriend. Now he's going around saying, yeah, well, but at least I'm not married. I'm not as bad as those other guys because I'm not married. Like, get out of here. The Donald Trump Justice Department, what do you think they've done? They've, of course, played their predictable role in helping this predator by denying a police search warrant request. And people still think they're going to root out all these corrupt people in our government. They are the corrupt people now. And when Speaker Mike Johnson was recently asked whether Max Miller and Cory Mills should step aside, he suddenly discovered the importance of the concept of unproven allegations. The key word there is allegation, Johnson said. He explained that the House has a process and that the Ethics Committee should investigate. Well, that's interesting because Eric Swalwell's case also involved unproven allegations, as did Graham Platner's case. Unproved allegations on both of them. But Democrats looked at those unproven allegations, and you know what they said? They said, we're not here to convict them in a court of law. We're here to decide whether they should represent our political party. And they said, we aren't going to gamble the credibility of our party on these men. We're not going to ask voters to ignore these women merely because we need, we need their votes for this guy, or because we want to win elections. They wouldn't do it. Give them credit. Now, whatever the reasons are, I'm not judging their hearts or, saying they, some kind of pure and holy people. But whatever the reasons were, they did the right thing. And whatever the reasons Republicans aren't doing the right thing because Republican leaders looked at these same allegations or, very similar allegations against their members and essentially said, these are just allegations. Nothing's been proven here. Let's investigate. We mustn't rush to judgment. So put your money where your mouths are, GOP, because the Democrats got you beat on this one. And that brings us back to Andrew and Tristan Tate. The Tate brothers didn't become popular in MAGA circles despite their public image. They became popular because of it. Andrew Tate built an enormous following by presenting himself aggressively and unapologetically as misogynistic. He's publicly described methods that he says he's used of abusively manipulating women. I mean, disgusting stuff, really disgusting stuff. And I feel angry that I have to watch some of this stuff to be able to come here and talk to you about it. Like, it angers me that any of us have to be drugged or dragged through this filth, to talk about current events. It's really crazy. But he's talked about methods of abusively manipulating women and getting them involved in this so-called webcam business. There are other recordings and messages from him that contain horrifying language about rape and violence. And their entire public brand was built around telling everyone exactly who they were. And powerful figures in Trump's orbit treat them as allies and said they were just victims of political persecution. Now, just think about that for a minute. It means they're saying that Democrats want to prosecute people like this, people who brag about their cruelty to women, who glorify rape, who teach boys how to enslave women and make them their personal sex workers. Wait, what? Hold on a second. If somebody wanted to prosecute people like that and they were Democrats, wouldn't that make you want to be a Democrat? I thought all you godly alleged Christian Republicans would be against all these sinful things. Democrats want to prosecute these guys, and you say they're persecuting them. So you're saying when you have people like that, if you want to take them to trial, take them to court, charge them with a crime, you're calling that persecution. I would call it justice. I would call it what I want to see happen to people like that. But you call yourselves a Christian, and then you say, stop persecuting these boys. Come on. I would think you'd want to support the party that's against those things, right? But by saying that's persecution, you're actually saying your party is for those things. That's what I'm trying to say. You're saying Republicans are for those things, and we don't want to persecute or prosecute. Pretty unbelievable. Uh, I mean, you'll say things like the Tates are just exercising their right to free speech, right? Well, first of all, if you're a Christian and they're using their free speech to promote sin, how can you be okay with that? I mean, free speech or not, but people have free speech, but it doesn't mean that you as a Christian have to support what they say. Free speech doesn't mean, and it doesn't mean that politicians have to embrace you. You can say something disgusting and horrible and say, I have the right to say it, but that doesn't mean anybody has to accept it. This isn't about free speech, obviously. And you know that when you say that. This is about what top Republican leaders embrace for the sake of MAGA and for the sake of their political benefit. And free speech doesn't mean that evidence of an alleged crime has to be ignored. If they're on video and audio saying, hey, I did this and I did that, it doesn't necessarily mean they did it, but it also doesn't mean we have to ignore it and not investigate it. We should investigate it. That's what a party that wants to do the right thing would do, right? Anyway, Democrats have shown themselves willing to give up power, to adhere to their principles, to stick to their principles, and Republicans haven't. Republicans embracing these two guys is despicable. It really is despicable. And oh well, they're innocent until proven guilty. Right, okay. Well, that's that may be an essential principle of criminal law, but it doesn't require a political party to elevate a person or to turn him into a hero or to embrace him or to accept him or to endorse them. Democrats didn't declare Eric Swalwell or Graham Platner legally guilty. They decided that neither man was entitled to carry the party's banner while facing allegations that serious. Republicans reserve that kind of moral clarity for Democrats. They will condemn Democrats at the drop of a hat. But when it comes to the Republicans, when it's one of their own, they suddenly demand endless investigations, perfect evidence, and absolute certainty. You can't say anybody's done anything wrong until you're absolutely certain and have a perfect investigation. And even when a jury has already reached a verdict, as it did in the case of Trump and E. Jean Carroll, they simply call the entire process political persecution. So that's the real difference between these two parties, and it's exposed by these cases. Just open your eyes and look at these cases. The real test comes when morality costs you something. And over the past year, Democrats have been the party that has repeatedly demonstrated that they're willing to pay that price. And the Republican Party, the party that claims to be the exclusive representative of Christian morality and constantly condemns Democrats as godless heathens, but the so called Christian Party has repeatedly demonstrated that political power comes first. So forget which party talks about morality the most, forget which party waves the biggest Bible, forget which party repeatedly tells you that it represents Christianity. Look at what they actually do when one of their own is accused, because that's where their real values are revealed. Will they choose party and power over principle? And in this case, I have to say, Democrats come out on top. All right. I mean, it's pretty plain as day, if you ask me. But that's what I had to get off my chest. And I appreciate listening. I'm Jonathan Burton. I will talk to you soon. And go out and make somebody smile today. Okay. All right. Take care. See you soon.